The twins lay motionless in their hospital beds, their fevered faces pale against white sheets as the most expensive pediatrician in the country stood helplessly beside their father. Dr. Harrison had exhausted every treatment protocol, every experimental therapy money could buy, yet 7-year-old Emma and Sophie continued to slip away. What none of them realized was that the answer to saving these precious lives wouldn't come from medical degrees or bank accounts, but from the weathered hands of a woman they barely noticed, armed with nothing but a mother's intuition and knowledge passed down through generations of healers. Marcus Blackwood had built an empire worth $12 billion, but all his wealth felt meaningless as he watched his twin daughters fighting for their lives in the pediatric intensive care unit. Since losing his wife Catherine to cancer 2 years ago, Emma and Sophie had become his entire world, the only light in his otherwise cold existence. The girls had fallen ill 3 weeks earlier with what seemed like a simple flu, but their condition had rapidly deteriorated into something that baffled even the most renowned specialists. Dr. Richard Harrison, the head of pediatric medicine at Metropolitan Children's Hospital and the highest-paid doctor on the East Coast, had been flown in at Marcus's insistence. His fees alone cost more than most people earned in a decade, but Marcus would have paid 10 times more to save his daughters. Yet despite Harrison's impressive credentials from Harvard Medical School and his reputation for handling the most complex cases, he seemed increasingly frustrated and out of options. "I've run every conceivable test," Harrison had told Marcus that morning, his voice carrying the arrogance of someone unaccustomed to failure. "Their symptoms don't match any standard pediatric illness profile. We're dealing with something highly unusual here, Mr. Blackwood. Perhaps we should consider transferring them to Johns Hopkins or Mayo Clinic." Meanwhile, moving silently through the hospital corridors was Elena Vasquez, a 53-year-old cleaning lady who had worked the night shift for 8 years. Elena's weathered hands bore the calluses of countless hours spent mopping floors and sanitizing surfaces, her uniform always impeccably clean despite the modest salary that barely covered her expenses. What no one at the hospital knew was that Elena carried within her mind an extraordinary gift, a photographic memory that retained every detail she encountered, combined with extensive knowledge of traditional healing practices learned from her grandmother, a curandera who had treated ailments in rural Mexico for over 60 years. Elena worked these halls not out of ambition, but out of necessity. Her own son Miguel was battling leukemia, and the experimental treatments not covered by insurance required every penny she could earn. She took on extra shifts, worked holidays, and never complained, all while maintaining a gentle smile and kind word for every patient she encountered. The wealthy families who passed her in the corridors rarely acknowledged her presence, seeing only the uniform and mop bucket, never the brilliant mind behind tired eyes. Each night as Elena cleaned the rooms, she observed everything with the keen attention of someone who understood that details others missed could be the difference between life and death. She noticed which children responded better to certain medications, which symptoms preceded complications, and which treatment seemed to help or harm. Her grandmother had taught her that healing required not just knowledge, but the ability to truly see what others overlooked. Don't forget to subscribe to hear how this incredible story unfolds and discover the shocking truth that changed everything for this billionaire father and his dying daughters. Marcus Blackwood paced the hospital corridors like a caged lion, his expensive Italian shoes clicking against the polished floors with each anxious step. At 42, he had never encountered a problem that couldn't be solved with enough money and influence, but his daughter's mysterious illness was proving immune to both. He had already donated $5 million to the hospital's research wing and promised another $10 million if they could save Emma and Sophie, yet their condition continued to worsen. The irony wasn't lost on him that the man who had revolutionized global supply chains through his logistics empire couldn't secure the one delivery that mattered most, his children's health. Marcus had built Blackwood Industries from nothing, transforming a small shipping company inherited from his father into a multinational corporation. He was known for his ruthless business tactics and his ability to identify solutions that others missed, but parenthood had revealed vulnerabilities he never knew existed. Dr. Harrison had assembled a team of specialists that read like a medical who's who, each commanding astronomical fees for their consultations. Infectious disease experts from CDC, neurologists from Boston Children's, toxicologists from Mount Sinai, all flown in at Marcus's expense. Yet with each passing day, their collective expertise seemed to matter less as Emma and Sophie grew weaker. The girls had been Marcus's anchor to humanity since Catherine's death. Before becoming a father, he had been even more cold and calculating, viewing people primarily as assets or obstacles in his business dealings. Catherine had softened those edges, and their daughters had completed his transformation into someone capable of genuine love. Now watching them suffer, he felt that old cynicism creeping back, along with a growing contempt for the medical professionals who took his money while delivering nothing but disappointing updates. Elena had been observing the Blackwood case since the twins arrived, not out of idle curiosity, but because something about their symptoms reminded her of stories her grandmother used to tell. As she cleaned their room each night, she noticed details that seemed to escape the attention of the medical team. The girls' breathing patterns, the subtle discoloration around their fingernails, the way they responded differently to various stimuli, all painted a picture that felt familiar from her grandmother's teachings about environmental poisoning. Her grandmother, Esperanza, had been renowned throughout Oaxaca for her ability to diagnose illnesses that modern doctors missed. Mira con el corazón, no solo con los ojos, she used to tell young Elena. Look with your heart, not just your eyes. Esperanza had taught her that Western medicine, for all its technological advances, sometimes missed the simple truths that indigenous healing traditions had understood for centuries. Elena's photographic memory allowed her to retain every detail of her grandmother's lessons, from the preparation of herbal remedies to the subtle signs that indicated specific types of poisoning. She remembered the case of 3 children in her village who had presented with similar symptoms to the Blackwood twins, children who had been saved not by expensive treatments, but by identifying and removing the source of their illness. The hospital's rigid hierarchy meant that Elena's observations would never reach the medical team through official channels. A cleaning lady suggesting a diagnosis to Dr. Harrison would be not just ignored, but likely result in her termination. She had seen other support staff dismissed for overstepping boundaries, and she couldn't afford to lose her job while Miguel still needed treatment. Yet each night as she watched Emma and Sophie struggle, Elena felt her grandmother's spirit urging her to act. The children reminded her of her own daughter Rosa at that age, before Elena had to send her back to Mexico to live with relatives when work became too demanding. The guilt of that separation still haunted her, making her even more determined to help when she could. Marcus found himself studying Elena during one of his late-night vigils, noticing for the first time the intelligence in her eyes as she worked around his daughter's room. Unlike the medical staff who entered with clipboards and important expressions, Elena moved with a gentle precision that seemed to bring peace to the space. He observed how Emma and Sophie, even in their weakened state, seemed to relax when she was near, as if sensing her genuinely caring presence. Dr. Harrison's frustration was becoming increasingly apparent as his reputation for solving impossible cases faced its greatest challenge. He had begun suggesting more experimental treatments, each carrying significant risks and costs. "We might need to consider some cutting-edge therapies that are still in trial phases," he told Marcus during their morning consultation. "The success rates are uncertain, but given the unusual nature of their condition, we may need to take calculated risks." The suggestion of experimental treatments on his 7-year-old daughters sent Marcus into a rage that surprised even him. "You're telling me that after 3 weeks and millions of dollars, your solution is to use my children as test subjects for unproven treatments?" His voice carried the icy fury that had once intimidated corporate rivals across 3 continents. Harrison's response revealed the arrogance that had been building throughout the case. "Mr. Blackwood, I understand your frustration, but you must trust the medical process. These children have a condition that's beyond conventional treatment protocols. If you don't trust my expertise, perhaps you should find someone else to take the case, though I doubt you'll find anyone more qualified." It was during this heated exchange that Elena entered the room for her routine cleaning, moving quietly around the periphery as the 2 powerful men argued over the fate of the children she had come to care about deeply. Her photographic memory had been working overtime, cataloging every detail of the girls' progression, cross-referencing their symptoms with her grandmother's teachings about various forms of poisoning. That night, as Elena cleaned the room adjacent to the twin suite, she overheard Marcus on a phone call with his business partner discussing some recent renovations to his mansion. The conversation included mentions of new paint, refinished floors, and updated children's playrooms, all completed just weeks before the girls became ill. Elena's mind immediately connected these details to her growing suspicion about environmental toxicity. Her grandmother had once treated a wealthy family whose children had been slowly poisoned by lead paint in their renovated home, and the symptoms Elena remembered matched almost exactly what she was observing in Emma and Sophie. The modern medical team was looking for exotic illnesses and rare conditions, but Elena's traditional knowledge suggested something much simpler and more sinister. The breaking point came when Dr. Harrison announced his intention to begin an aggressive experimental treatment protocol that would involve powerful immunosuppressants. Elena knew from her grandmother's teachings that such treatments would be catastrophic if her suspicions about environmental poisoning were correct. The medications would prevent the girls' bodies from fighting off the toxins, potentially accelerating their decline. Elena faced an impossible choice: maintain her invisible status and watch the children potentially die from misguided treatment, or risk everything to share knowledge that could save their lives. The memory of her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, reminding her that sometimes the greatest courage is required not to fight, but to speak truth to power. If you're enjoying this incredible story of courage against impossible odds, please hit the like button to support more inspiring content like this. The decision that would change everything came to Elena during her break, as she sat in the hospital's cramped employee lounge eating a sandwich she had made at home to save money. She thought about Miguel, fighting his own battle with leukemia, and how she would want someone to speak up if they had knowledge that could save his life. She thought about her grandmother's teachings about the responsibility that comes with knowledge, especially knowledge that could heal. Elena had never directly approached a wealthy patient's family before, understanding the invisible barriers that separated her world from theirs. But as she had observed Marcus during his late-night vigils, she had noticed something in his eyes that reminded her of her own desperation when Miguel was first diagnosed. Beneath his expensive suits and commanding presence, he was simply a father watching his children suffer. That evening, as Marcus sat beside his daughter's beds watching their labored breathing, Elena made her approach. She had rehearsed what she would say, knowing she would likely have only moments before being dismissed or escorted away by security. Her heart pounded as she quietly entered the room during what she knew was typically his private time with the girls. "Excuse me, Mr. Blackwood," she said softly, her voice carrying the slight accent that marked her as someone who had learned English as a second language. "I know I have no right to speak to you, but I believe I might know what's wrong with your daughters." Marcus looked up sharply, initially annoyed by the interruption. His first instinct was to call security, but something in Elena's demeanor stopped him. Unlike the confident arrogance of the medical professionals who had been disappointing him for weeks, Elena approached with genuine humility and obvious concern for his children. "I've been cleaning their room for weeks," Elena continued, speaking quickly before losing her courage. "I've watched them, and their symptoms remind me of something my grandmother treated many years ago. I think they might be suffering from lead poisoning, possibly from recent renovations in your home." The suggestion was so simple, so far from the exotic diagnoses being pursued by Harrison's team, that Marcus's first reaction was dismissive. "Lead poisoning? The doctors have run every test imaginable. Don't you think they would have checked for something so basic?" Elena's response revealed the depth of knowledge hidden beneath her humble exterior. Sometimes the most obvious answers are overlooked when people are looking for complex solutions. Lead poisoning in children can present with symptoms that mimic many other conditions, especially when the exposure is gradual and from multiple sources. The breathing difficulties, the neurological symptoms, even the way their energy fluctuates, it all fits the pattern. She went on to describe, with startling accuracy, specific details about Emma and Sophie's condition that she had observed during her nightly cleanings. Her photographic memory allowed her to recall exact times when their symptoms spiked, patterns in their discomfort that aligned with her theory about ongoing exposure to environmental toxins. Marcus found himself listening despite his skepticism. Elena's observations were more detailed and nuanced than many of the reports he had received from highly paid specialists. More importantly, she spoke about his daughters with genuine affection, referring to them by name and showing intimate knowledge of their individual personalities and responses to treatment. "Even if you're right," Marcus said, "which I'm not saying you are, Dr. Harrison and his team would have tested for lead exposure. It's a standard part of pediatric toxicology screening." Elena had anticipated this objection. "I've overheard discussions about the blood tests. They tested for acute lead exposure, but chronic low-level exposure, especially from multiple sources, can be harder to detect with standard tests. My grandmother taught me that sometimes you need to test for lead in hair and bone, not just blood, to find chronic poisoning." The conversation was interrupted by Dr. Harrison's arrival for his evening rounds. His reaction to finding Elena in conversation with his patient's father was immediate and harsh. "What is this woman doing here? Mr. Blackwood, I must insist that non-medical personnel not be allowed to interfere with patient care. This is highly inappropriate." Harrison's dismissive tone toward Elena revealed an arrogance that suddenly struck Marcus as familiar. It was the same condescending attitude he had once displayed toward employees he considered beneath his notice, before fatherhood and loss had taught him to value people differently. Watching Harrison's treatment of Elena triggered something in Marcus that surprised him with its intensity. "Actually, Dr. Harrison, Elena was sharing some observations about my daughter's condition." Observations that seem more insightful than anything your team has produced in 3 weeks. The confrontation that followed would become the turning point of the entire ordeal. Harrison's response was to lecture both Marcus and Elena about medical credentials and the dangers of untrained individuals interfering with complex cases. His arrogance reached its peak when he suggested that Elena's amateur theories could be dangerous to the children's treatment. Elena stood quietly during Harrison's tirade, but Marcus watched her face and saw something that reminded him of his wife Catherine, a quiet strength that didn't need to shout to be heard. When Harrison finished his dismissive speech, Elena spoke again, this time with more confidence. "Doctor, with respect, I understand you have impressive credentials. But my grandmother successfully treated cases that trained doctors could not solve. Sometimes wisdom comes from experience, not just from textbooks. These children are dying while we argue about who has the right to try to save them." Her words hung in the air with the weight of absolute truth. Emma and Sophie were indeed growing weaker while the adults around them debated protocols and hierarchies. Elena's simple observation cut through weeks of medical complexity to the heart of the matter. Nothing being done was working, and time was running out. Marcus made a decision that would transform not just his daughter's fate, but his own understanding of where wisdom and value truly resided. "Dr. Harrison, I want comprehensive tests for lead exposure, including the hair and bone testing that Elena mentioned. I want them done immediately." Harrison's response revealed the full extent of his arrogance. "Mr. Blackwood, I cannot in good conscience waste time on diagnostic wild goose chases suggested by cleaning staff. If you cannot trust my medical judgment, perhaps you should find another physician." The moment of ultimate confrontation had arrived, and it centered not on complex medical theories, but on a simple question of whether pride or children's lives mattered more. Elena stood in the room where she had worked invisibly for years, finally visible, her knowledge finally valued, as two powerful men decided the fate of the children she had come to love. Marcus looked at his daughters, then at Elena, then at the arrogant doctor who had taken hundreds of thousands of dollars while delivering no results. In that moment, he realized that sometimes the most important truths come from the most unexpected sources, and that wisdom often wears work clothes and speaks with a gentle accent. "Dr. Harrison, you're dismissed. Elena, please sit down and tell me everything your grandmother taught you about lead poisoning." The climax of Elena's courage came as she sat beside Marcus Blackwood, no longer invisible, no longer just the cleaning lady, but a woman whose knowledge might be the key to saving 2 precious lives. Her photographic memory unlocked years of her grandmother's teachings as she explained in detail the signs of chronic lead exposure, the sources commonly found in renovated homes, and the specific treatments that traditional healers had used long before modern medicine existed. As Elena spoke, Marcus found himself seeing her clearly for the first time, recognizing the intelligence and compassion that had been present all along, hidden beneath society's assumptions about who possessed valuable knowledge. Her detailed understanding of Emma and Sophie's specific symptoms, combined with her insights about potential sources of exposure in his recently renovated mansion, painted a picture that finally made sense of his daughter's mysterious illness. The comprehensive lead testing Elena had suggested revealed devastating results. Both girls showed severe chronic lead exposure from multiple sources in their renovated playroom, including contaminated paint dust, refinished flooring materials, and even imported toys with lead-based decorations. The poisoning had been gradual but relentless, building up in their systems over the weeks since the renovation was completed. Dr. Harrison's experimental treatment protocol would have been catastrophic, potentially fatal for children suffering from chronic lead poisoning. Elena's intervention had literally saved Emma and Sophie's lives, preventing them from receiving treatments that would have made their condition worse while missing the simple cure they actually needed. The immediate aftermath of Elena's revelation brought swift action from Marcus, who mobilized resources to address both the diagnosis and treatment with the same intensity he had once applied to hostile corporate takeovers. The mansion was professionally tested and remediated, removing every source of lead contamination. The girls began proper chelation therapy to remove lead from their systems, and their improvement was rapid and dramatic. Within 48 hours of beginning proper treatment, Emma and Sophie were sitting up in their beds, their color improving, their energy returning. The transformation was so remarkable that it attracted attention from other medical professionals who had been following the mysterious case of the billionaire's dying daughters. Dr. Harrison's reputation suffered considerably when the medical community learned that a cleaning lady had solved the case that had stumped one of the country's most expensive pediatric specialists. His arrogance had blinded him to simple solutions while he pursued complex theories, and his dismissive treatment of Elena had nearly resulted in tragedy. Marcus's transformation was even more profound than his daughter's physical recovery. Watching Elena's quiet courage and brilliant insights had forced him to confront his own assumptions about worth and wisdom. He realized that his business success had come partly from his ability to recognize value wherever it existed, but his personal life had been limited by social prejudices he had never examined. The man who had once barely noticed the support staff in his own building now saw Elena as the hero she had always been. Her willingness to risk everything to save his daughters had demonstrated a courage that he rarely encountered in his world of corporate leaders and wealthy socialites. More importantly, her combination of traditional knowledge and keen observation had provided solutions that all the expensive expertise money could buy had missed. Elena's own transformation was quieter but equally significant. For 8 years, she had worked invisibly, her intelligence and knowledge unrecognized by those around her. Now she found herself valued not just for her labor, but for her mind, her wisdom, and her compassionate heart. The validation of her grandmother's teachings and her own observations gave her a confidence she had never allowed herself to feel in professional settings. Share your thoughts in the comments about what this story reveals about the wisdom we might be overlooking in the people around us every day. The resolution of Elena's courage brought changes that extended far beyond the hospital walls where her heroism had unfolded. Marcus, grateful beyond any monetary expression, insisted on covering all of Miguel's medical expenses, ensuring Elena's son would receive the best possible treatment for his leukemia. But his gratitude went deeper than financial support, evolving into genuine respect and friendship. Elena was offered a position as a patient advocate and cultural liaison at the hospital, a role that would allow her to bridge the gap between traditional healing wisdom and modern medical practice. Her salary would be 10 times what she had earned as a cleaning lady, but more importantly, her knowledge and insights would be valued and utilized to help other patients whose conditions might benefit from her unique perspective. The hospital administration, initially embarrassed by the incident, eventually recognized the value of Elena's contribution and established a program for incorporating traditional healing knowledge into their diagnostic processes. Elena became the director of this innovative program, working with medical professionals to ensure that cultural wisdom was not overlooked in favor of purely technical approaches. Marcus's relationship with his daughters deepened as their recovery progressed, but he had also learned profound lessons about recognizing worth in unexpected places. He instituted changes throughout Blackwood Industries, creating programs to identify and develop talent regardless of educational background or social position. His corporate culture, once focused purely on credentials and hierarchy, began to value insight and character in equal measure. The friendship that developed between Marcus and Elena was built on mutual respect and shared understanding of what truly mattered in life. Both had been tested by circumstances that revealed their deepest values, and both had been transformed by the experience. Marcus had learned humility and the importance of remaining open to wisdom from any source, while Elena had discovered that her knowledge and compassion had value that extended far beyond her family and community. Emma and Sophie recovered completely, their bright personalities returning as their bodies healed from the lead poisoning that had nearly claimed their lives. They developed a special bond with Elena, who had literally saved their lives through her courage and knowledge. The woman they called Tia Elena became a permanent part of their family, her wisdom and love helping to fill the void left by their mother's death. The story spread throughout the medical community and beyond, becoming a powerful reminder that expertise and wisdom can be found in the most unexpected places. Elena's combination of traditional knowledge, careful observation, and photographic memory had succeeded where expensive specialists had failed, not through luck, but through genuine understanding and compassionate attention to detail. Miguel's successful treatment became another testament to Elena's transformative journey. With access to the best medical care and his mother no longer working multiple jobs to pay for treatment, he thrived, eventually becoming a pre-med student inspired by Elena's story and determined to bridge traditional and modern healing approaches in his own career. The bond between the Blackwood family and Elena became a source of strength for everyone involved. Marcus had found not just the person who saved his daughters, but a friend whose wisdom and character continued to enrich his life. Elena had discovered that her knowledge and compassion had power she had never imagined, and that courage in the face of hierarchy and prejudice could literally save lives. Years later, when Elena was asked about that pivotal night when she chose to speak up despite the risks, she would always credit her grandmother's teachings about the responsibility that comes with knowledge. Esperanza taught me that when you have the power to heal, you have the obligation to try, regardless of what others might think of you or your background. The story became a legacy that extended beyond the immediate participants, inspiring healthcare workers, corporate leaders, and ordinary people to recognize that wisdom often comes disguised in work clothes and speaks with accents that mark it as foreign to those who hold traditional power. Elena's courage had not only saved 2 precious lives, but it also opened minds to the possibility that the most important truths might be found in the most unexpected places. The transformation of Marcus Blackwood from a cynical billionaire focused solely on corporate success to a man who understood the true value of wisdom and character became a model for other business leaders. His support for Elena's career and his changes to corporate culture demonstrated that personal growth and social responsibility could coexist with business success. Elena's journey from invisible cleaning lady to respected healthcare advocate illustrated the potential that exists within every person, regardless of their current circumstances or social position. Her story became a powerful reminder that intelligence, wisdom, and courage are distributed throughout society, often hidden by assumptions about who possesses valuable knowledge. The hospital room where Elena had first found the courage to speak up became a symbol of the transformations possible when people are willing to look beyond surface appearances to recognize the worth and wisdom present in every individual. The simple act of listening to someone society had rendered invisible had saved 2 lives and changed countless others. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories of courage, wisdom, and the extraordinary potential that exists within ordinary people who find the strength to make a difference when it matters most. The legacy of that night when a cleaning lady's knowledge saved a billionaire's daughters continues to inspire people to look beyond credentials and social positions to recognize the wisdom that surrounds us every day. Elena's story reminds us that heroism often wears humble clothes and speaks with a gentle voice, but its power to change lives and transform hearts is limitless when courage meets opportunity and compassion guides action.